The Trump administration moving forward with a plan to deploy the National Guard to the U.S.-Mexico border as Democrats accuse the White House of playing politics with the military. I'm Julie Banderas. Good evening. This is a Fox Report. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis signing orders to send as many as 4,000 National Guard troops to the southern border to combat what President Trump describes as a surge of illegal drugs and gang activity. Some Democrats are dismissing the move as a political stunt, but Republican Congressman Darrell Issa pointing out that deployment is not without precedent.
Under both Republican and Democratic presidents, this has gone on. As a matter of fact, General Mattis was stationed at Camp Pendleton during many of these historic deployments. The fact is, our Border Patrol is swamped because of the inefficiency of trying to guard a border without a fence, without some sort of real barrier to slow down masses of people trying to get over.
Gillian Turner has the very latest from Washington tonight. Hi, Jillian, rather.
Hi, Julie. Just a while ago, President Trump tweeted, "We are sealing up our southern border. The people of our great country want safety and security." The Dems have been a disaster on this very important issue. Reaction from state governors across the U.S. has been mixed. Here's Governor Brown of Oregon.
There's been absolutely no planning. There's been absolutely no collaboration with the states. This is just something that the president reeled off to distract from the problems that he's having in Washington, D.C.
But other governors from states like Arizona, Mississippi, and Arkansas are supportive of President Trump's move. Some even are weighing in high-profile former governors. Take a listen.
I think it's terrific news. I think that President Trump is taking real steps to secure our border, all the while that we have certainly tried to get it done, but he is delivering on his promises.
The state of Texas has already begun to dispatch 250 of its own guardsmen to help support the mission at the border. Arizona plans to send an additional 150 next week. But even once all these forces are in place, the mission will fall far short of the several thousand the commander-in-chief has called for. A joint statement from Secretary of Defense Mattis and Secretary of Homeland Security Nielsen makes clear that no matter whose guardsmen report for duty, their agencies are prepared to carry out the mission. It says in part, tonight, National Guard troops are deploying to support border security missions along the U.S. southwest border. We are committed to using every lever of power to support the men and women of law enforcement, defending our nation's sovereignty and protecting the American people. A reminder is in order here, Julie, that previous presidents have made similar moves. President W. Bush deployed the Guard to the border in 2006 and President Obama in 2010. But illegal entries at our southern border are lower today than they've been since the 1970s, according to DHS's own statistics. Julie?
All right, Jillian Turner, thank you so much. We have a Fox News alert now. The New York Fire Department is reporting a fire on the 50th floor of Trump Tower. We've got Brian Yennis live at Trump Tower with the very latest. We can hear the sirens from here. What's the latest where you are?
Hi, Julie. Well, easily more than a dozen fire trucks here at Trump Tower on 56th, 57th, between 5th Avenue and Madison, Midtown Manhattan. Take a look. This is Trump Tower behind us. That's the 50th floor. That is what's left. It was flames and fires coming out of that 50th floor. This is a 68-floor tall building, about 660-something feet up. But that is the 50th floor. You can see that the firefighters have contained the fire from what we can tell. This was a 4-alarm fire, according to the FDNY. There is one person who was seriously injured, a civilian inside the building. That's what we know so far about the fire. If you take a look back here, though, this is between 5th and Madison Avenue. This is just some of the fire trucks that we're seeing here on the road. Again, easily more than a dozen fire trucks, easily more than 100 firefighters that battled this flame. But again, looks like it is under control. Eric Trump actually tweeting, "Thank you to the amazing men and women of the NYFD who extinguished a fire in a residential apartment at Trump Tower. The FDNY and NYPD are truly some of the most incredible people anywhere." And President Donald Trump also tweeting about this fire, saying, "Fire at Trump Tower is out. Very confined, well-built building. Firemen and women did a great job. thank you. We are still waiting to hear, though, from the FDNY as to whether or not the fire is officially out. But as you can tell, again, the flames are no longer coming out of that building. From what we can tell, it looks to be extinguished, but firefighters are still working. One seriously injured person, though. We spoke to another person who was evacuated from the Gucci store that was down here. As you know, Julie, a ton of high-end shops and stores and plenty of tourists that are out here right now taking photos. We spoke to one of those residents who were civilians who was visiting the Gucci store who was told to evacuate. That was on the first floor of the Trump Tower. He asked, why did I have to evacuate? They said it was a fire. Everyone left the building. That is what we know thus far. 4-alarm fire here. Looks to be under control. Again, that was about 45 minutes ago we got the call. One serious injured. Julie.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll go back to you if we get any more information on this investigation. Thank you, Brian, reporting live from Trump Tower. And now back to the news of Defense Secretary James Mattis deploying up to 4,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. I want to bring in now Andrew Egger, reporter for the Weekly Standard. So we pretty much knew this was coming because this week the president, on his message about tax cuts, very much focused on immigration when he was speaking to folks in West Virginia, that he wanted 4,000 National Guard troops to secure the border. Some 250 are basically heading there tonight. What's the latest as to the rollout and how they get the 4,000 out there?
Well, essentially, there's 250 coming from Texas, 150 coming from Arizona, I believe. And, I'm not 100% sure how that's all going to work, but we will see that rolling out in the next couple weeks. Obviously, like you said, within the past week or so here, President Trump has clearly gotten interested in the idea of using his military authority to accomplish some of his immigration aims. Obviously, you hear a lot about the wall, but one thing that's also been part of his desire for immigration is to just get more bodies on the border. Like you heard Representative Issa say just a couple of minutes ago, it is a tall order with a whole lot of ground to cover. And so he tweeted last week about immigration being a national security issue and potential to build the wall with military action. And so I think this is just sort of a logical outflow of that, with deploying the Guard in an auxiliary role to help out Border Patrol agents and also do some construction of and repair of fences along the wall.
Right. Okay. So there are several states that essentially received a memo that this would be happening, Arizona being one of them, California. The question is whether or not California will comply. And former Arizona Governor Jan Brewer addressed that issue when she spoke with Neil Cavuto earlier today. And she went as far as calling out other governors for not taking border security seriously. Let's listen to that.
They're just sitting on their hands and doing nothing. They're not taking the issue seriously. I think they ought to think about what their oath of office is in regards to protecting their citizens, and they need to respect the federal authority. It's outrageous that they are doing what they're doing. But I will say this, Neil, I'm encouraged by some of the local law enforcement agencies in these states, California in particularly, and council people that are stepping up, and they are respecting their oath, and they are protecting the people.
So it'll be interesting to see how the state of California does respond to this, because there has been a bit of a tug of war when it comes to sanctuary cities, et cetera. But she just pointed out California so far is playing ball.
Right. Yeah. And she does raise, an interesting question, which is, why is this, happening now? What's the point of this? Because, just last year when President Trump took office, you saw pretty much right away there was a pretty dramatic drop in people attempting to make the border crossing. So that, it's a fair question of whether or not it's an urgent action. But I think what the White House is concerned about, and DHS Secretary Nielsen made this point recently, is that people who last year might have attempted to make the illegal crossing, but were deterred just by President Trump's strong rhetoric on immigration. Now, just this year, may have started to cotton on, I guess, to the notion that not a lot has changed in terms of federal immigration policy. If they're able to cross over illegally and are apprehended, they'll still be released pending a date with an immigration judge. So they're worried about people, those numbers starting to tick back up again. I think that's why the White House is showing some urgency here.
I mean, in the month month between February and March, in fact, apprehensions had gone up. Attorney General Jeff Sessions essentially basically said that there's going to be now a zero tolerance policy when it comes to apprehending these people. Some Democrats argue, first of all, that by sending out 4,000 National Guardsmen, that it's just an utter waste of money. It's not like they can go out and arrest. They can just protect. They should be used elsewhere. But what else is there to do? I mean, there is no immigration policy put in place at this point. A wall or spending for such was not in the latest spending bill. It seems that this is the only solution at this juncture.
Well, and there's no question that, at least in terms of this being a really outrageous new change, that's relatively political and overblown. The number is up to 4,000 deployed. President Bush sent 6,000, a decade ago. It's for some of the same similar sorts of things. I do think that at least the other side of the political coin is that clearly there are political benefits to President Trump doing this, which is that, he's had some difficulty with getting his immigration agenda passed in Congress, and this allows him to say to people who care about border security and things like that, look, I know that I haven't been able so far to deliver on these wide changes that I want, but just as far as what I'm able to do as Commander-in-Chief, I'll do that in this small way, and that you can sort of consider this a down payment that I'm not going to allow these issues to fade away as my term goes on. All
right, Andrew Egger, thank you very much for talking to us. We appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Right now, we are keeping an eye on a 4-alarm fire on the 50th floor at Trump Tower. Brian Yanis is gathering more information for you. We will have updates in just a moment. Plus, families mourning the loss of loved ones after a series of military aviation crashes just this week, where the latest one happened. And the heartland could be taking a big financial hit if China carries out its threat to slap big tariffs on things like soybeans and pork. But will it actually happen? That's the question.
We'll see how it plays out. I understand the president's focus on trying to get China to not be stealing intellectual property and doing things in the right way. But I'm a little concerned.
Another deadly military helicopter crash leaves a community in mourning tonight. This one happening at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. 2 pilots were killed when the helicopter went down during a routine training drill. This crash coming on the heels of a difficult week for military aviation. On Tuesday, 4 Marines were killed on a training mission in Southern California. Another crash happened that same day, with the pilot surviving. On Wednesday, an Air Force Thunderbird F-16 crashed, killing the pilot. And then yesterday's crash in Kentucky. The names of the 2 soldiers have not yet been released. A trade war potentially on the horizon between the world's 2 biggest economies. We're talking the U.S. and China, of course, both making tariff threats that could result in massive losses for those in the heartland. The president tweeting the United States hasn't had a trade surplus with China in 40 years. They must end unfair trade, take down barriers, and charge only reciprocal tariffs. The U.S. is losing $500 billion a year and has been losing billions of dollars for decades. Cannot continue. Well, the Minneapolis Federal Reserve president sharing his thoughts on the matter as well. Listen.
This could be a lot of chest pounding, and it could be a lot of bluster and not lead to real impact on the economy. But it could lead to a trade war, or it could be something in the middle where it's a lot of bluster, but it scares investors, both businesses and investors, and they pull back, and that could impact the growth of the U.S. economy. So I think the impact on Main Street is going to be seen over the long term.
Garrett Tenney explains just how it impacts farmers here at home.
Julie, the big concern on Wall Street is that this trade dispute escalates into a full-blown trade war between the world's 2 biggest economies. Both the U.S. and China say they'd like to avoid a trade war, but on Friday, Beijing said it's not afraid to fight one and is prepared to do so no matter how much it costs.
China will fight back for sure. China will respond in a new and comprehensive way and will pay the price to resolutely defend the interests of its country and its people.
Caught in the middle of this growing trade fight are American farmers. China is one of the biggest markets for U.S. agriculture, and any additional tariffs by China would have a significant impact on hundreds of thousands of American jobs.
China buys 1 out of every 3 soybeans produced. And I'm standing in the #1 soybean producing state in the country of Illinois. So it would certainly be a devastating situation if those tariffs were to go in place. And so ultimately our hope is both countries can walk back from the edge of the cliff here and maybe find a better solution.
The Trump administration says it's preparing to take steps to protect American farmers from any new tariffs that China imposes. Yesterday, the president's new chief economic advisor suggested this back and forth with China is all part of the negotiation process.
My point is, tariffs enter the picture, negotiations enter the picture, the WTO enters the picture. You follow? And you've just got to walk through this process, and we'll see. Hopefully, this will have a very happy ending.
The Trump administration hasn't announced what Chinese goods will fall under its proposed $150 billion in tariffs, and China still hasn't announced what it plans to do in response. Julie?
Garrett Tenney, thank you. We are keeping a very close eye on Trump Tower here in New York City, where crews have responded to a 4-alarm fire. We'll have a live report with the very latest straight ahead, plus the students behind March for Our Lives, holding town halls all across the country. And they are counting on lawmakers from both parties to attend.
It's not any one person, it's not one elected official, it's not one level of government, it's not just the community, it's not community leadership. Exclusively, take all of us.
Students behind the March for Our Lives movement against gun violence, pushing to keep their agenda in the public arena. Student organizers holding a series of town halls for lawmakers this weekend and leaving empty chairs for those who were invited but didn't attend. The group demands action in the wake of multiple school shootings, including the recent high school shooting in Parkland, Florida.
We have a tremendous amount of empathy. What we need is that empathy to be translated into policy, so that we can make sure that we can keep people safe in school, in movie theaters, at concerts, on military bases, in neighborhoods.
The town hall's taking place during a congressional recess. Police in Seattle are going after certain gun owners, and it's getting support from some people strongly in favor of the Second Amendment. Fox News correspondent Dan Springer reports.
I'm grateful that the police got the gun away from me.
This Army veteran who is being treated for PTSD recently had his gun confiscated by the Seattle police. It's one of 27 guns seized from 16 people by SPD since last July, legally under Washington State's new extreme risk protection order law. Even though Alexander McKenzie had committed no crime, he realizes due to his mental state, being armed was too risky. Washington is one of 6 states with ERPOs, also known as red flag laws. But in the wake of the Parkland school shooting, the Brady campaign says at least 30 states are considering them.
I think we're seeing some building consensus in, blue states and red states that this is a good way to balance public safety against people's Second Amendment rights.
Guns are removed for 1 year, but there is due process. Only family, roommates, or police can petition the court for the civil order. A judge has to determine the person is a danger to himself or others, and the gun owner gets a chance to make his or her case. Even gun rights advocates who are afraid of government abuse say it appears to be working.
We've seen the downside to people who are distraught or crazy taking out their problems on the general public. We don't want that to happen.
One petition to seize guns was turned down by a judge. All others have been granted, including the taking of this AR-15 rifle. According to the pastors of this Seattle church, a former member threatened to kill them and wished the recent Texas church massacre had happened there.
I have no doubt that it is a kind of tool that we can use to prevent greater tragedies.
Taking someone's guns is always potentially volatile, so Seattle cops bend over backwards to avoid being heavy-handed. 9 months in, both sides say the law is being used sparingly, and no one has alleged a violation of his rights, making it more likely other states will follow. In Seattle, Dan Springer, Fox News.
Dan Springer, thank you very much. Breaking news from Trump Tower here in New York City, where the FDNY has responded to a 4-alarm fire up on the 50th floor. It's out now, what we're learning at this hour. Plus, the growing controversy around EPA Chief Scott Pruitt. Why a number of Republicans are standing behind him, despite mounting outrage over his apparent security and travel expenses.
I think people make mistakes, and mistakes don't put people in a swamp. I think it's a tough issue for people to talk about, but I think if you look at the preponderance of the evidence, I think Scott Pruitt is doing a great job.
News alert: a fire erupting on the 50th floor of Trump Tower here in New York City. And we've got Brian Yennis, who's been gathering all the very latest information for us. He joins us now on Fifth Avenue in Midtown. So, Brian, what can you tell us? What's the latest on this investigation?
Hi, Julie. Well, we're going to have a press conference here in about a few moments that they're going to give us more information. But this is what we know so far. There was a fire on the 50th floor. There are about 263 luxury condos in Trump Tower between floors 30 and 68. And this fire started on the 50th floor. It was a 4-alarm fire. It is out now. And you can see there the smoke and water actually that's billowing out of those out of that apartment building right now. The firefighters are still very much there. Again, this is a 4-alarm fire. So there was over 100 firefighters that are here currently, easily more than a dozen fire trucks, probably 24. There was nobody from the Trump family inside the tower at the time of the fire. Melania Trump, the First Lady, is usually she is here often. She was not here, neither was Barron. So that is good news. We do know that Eric Trump did tweet the following. He said, "Thank you to the amazing men and women of the NYFD who extinguished a fire in a residential apartment at Trump Tower. The FDNY and NYPD are truly some of the most incredible people anywhere." We do know that one person was seriously injured in this fire. There is a report about 3 firefighters suffering minor injuries, but we are still waiting to get official word on that. But that is what we're hearing thus far. 1 seriously injured, 3 firefighters with minor injuries reportedly here at Trump Tower. Again, this is in Midtown Manhattan between 56th, 57th Street and 5th Avenue. We're right now between 5th and Madison. So there are still plenty of tourists that are walking around, and the fire trucks are here, and plenty of shops that had to be evacuated underneath Trump Tower as well when this fire started about an hour and a half now. Julie.
Okay, we understand there is a news conference that's going to be held right now, so let's go to that to get more answers as to the cause here.
Of course, as they usually do. Excuse me? Any members of the inside? No, there are no members of the First Family in residence today.
A number of residents say they did not hear alarms. Can you confirm if that was the case?
I don't know. This alarm came in as an automatic alarm from us, not a phone alarm. It came in through an alarm company, and we responded to that alarm.
Will the victim alone in the apartment?
That high up?
What's that?
Yeah, how hard is it to fight a fire that high up?
Well, first of all, the units have to get there. They have to hook up to a standpipe system with their hose. It takes a little longer. The fire, of course, the building is, it contains the heat, it contains the smoke. It was extremely hot in the apartment. Units pushing in are in great danger, but they do nonetheless. The apartment, they tell me, was quite large, so there's quite a lot of furniture and quite a lot of fire load. As you can see from the videos, you can tell the volume of fire coming out the windows. It was a considerable job by our members.
Any extension to neighboring apartments?
Only smoke.
Was there other people said in a tweet that it's a well-built building. The president tweeted that the building is well-built. It's well-built?
It's a well-built building. It's built, the upper floors, which are residence floors, are not sprinkler. But the building sure stood up quite well.
We know there's extra police protection here. Is there extra fire protection?
Only when the president is in residence.
How long will it take to control the fire? We're still not under control.
It's still not considered under control because of the smoke conditions on all the floors above.
No populations
are only in the immediate area. We got the alarm at 5:35.
Okay, gang.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner President hasn't called you or anything to thank you for your...
All right, that's Daniel Nigro. He is the fire commissioner for the New York Fire Department, essentially confirming 4 people in all injured. There were 3 firefighters bravely fighting this fire, if you imagine, on the 50th floor of a building that has over 200 floors in it. There was 1 resident inside, so 1 resident inside that apartment. So it doesn't seem that there was anything suspicious. behind this. They continue to investigate the cause. Of course, that does take time. The first alarm came in at about 5:30. This is a 4-alarm fire. The way this works is if a fire is that intense, each time another alarm is called, that means more fire trucks from different companies are called in. So this was all hands on deck. You could hear the alarms pretty much bearing down all of 6th Avenue, which is adjacent and parallel to 5th Avenue, where the Trump Tower was located. None of the first family members were in the building at the time. He just confirmed that once again. Brian Yennis was reporting that as well. So at this point, it's under investigation. The fire is out, fortunately, but unfortunately, 4 people were injured, including 3 very brave firefighters who went in there, risked their lives to put that fire out, and 1 resident. But we don't know the condition of all 4. We'll get more information, and when we do, we will bring it to you here on the Fox Report. Now, moving on to growing calls for President Trump to fire EPA Chief Scott Pruitt. A new report claiming Pruitt's security and travel expenses have ballooned to millions of dollars. This after it was revealed he rented a $50 a day condo from the wife of a lobbyist. But President Trump is standing behind Pruitt, along with a number of conservatives who say he is doing important work.
I think that what he's got to do is somehow show the American public that he's got the EPA buckled down, come to the table, show how things are going to be different, which I think he's starting to do. A huge chunk of the changes that have taken place that are making the economy hum again are in large part from President Trump's orders that Scott Pruitt is implementing.
Ellison Barber has the very latest from the White House tonight. So, Ellison, is Pruitt's job safe?
Well, Julie, President Trump says that he believes Pruitt is doing a good job. In fact, he said he thinks he is doing a fantastic job at the EPA. But White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says they are reviewing some of this.
I think that Scott has done a fantastic job. I think he's a fantastic person.
No one other than the president has the authority to hire and fire members of his cabinet. It's a decision that he'll make. And right now, I don't have any personnel announcements. The president feels that the administrator has done a good job at EPA.
Sources tell Fox News Pruitt met with the president in the Oval Office yesterday, and some of these controversies came up in their discussion. A source says the president told Pruitt during that meeting that he's doing a good job at the EPA and wants him to continue. But since that meeting, there's a new report in the Associated Press about Pruitt's security detail. According to the AP, Pruitt has a full-time security detail that's 3 times the size of his predecessors and is costing taxpayers about $3 million. The EPA says it's necessary. In a statement, they told Fox News, quote, Scott Pruitt has faced an unprecedented amount of death threats against him and his family. Americans should all agree that members of the president's cabinet should be kept safe from these violent threats. Julie?
All right. Is there any evidence of those threats, by the way?
Well, in the past, the Assistant Inspector General for the EPA has told various news outlets that Administrator Pruitt has received more threats than his predecessor. But the AP says they did a nationwide search of state and federal records. And essentially, they say they came up empty. They said, quote, they found no case where anyone has been arrested or charged with threatening Pruitt. Pruitt is, of course, also under fire for renting that apartment from a lobbyist whose firm represents fossil fuel companies.
Why does it matter when the ethics officials look at the lease and the terms of the lease to determine whether it's ethical?
Why does it matter? It's because you're renting it from the wife of a lobbyist.
Yeah. Who has no business before this agency.
Hold on a second. So
who has no business.
Mr. Hart is at Williams & Jensen, right? Major lobbying firm. ExxonMobil is a client.
Mr. Hart has no clients. To extend it to third parties in his firm is absolutely a stretch.
At least 3 Republican lawmakers have publicly said that Pruitt either needs to resign or the president should fire him. Dozens of Democratic lawmakers are saying the exact same thing. Julie?
Ellison Barber at the White House tonight. Thank you so much. The Justice Department announcing a zero-tolerance policy on illegal border crossings. Attorney General Jeff Sessions ordering U.S. attorneys along the border to prosecute anyone who tries to enter the U.S. illegally. Anita Vogel joins me now live from Los Angeles to explain this zero-tolerance policy. And Anita, this really is a big change from the way illegal crossings have been handled in the past, right?
It is. It is a huge change, Julie. For the last 40 or 50 years or so, the worst that could happen to any first-time offender who got caught was that they got turned back around to where they came from. Now they'll be prosecuted for breaking the law, they'll serve jail time, and then they'll get deported. And because they'll have a criminal conviction, they won't be allowed to enter the U.S. again.
Well, it's good news. I congratulate Attorney General Sessions for trying to remind the world that there is a rule of law in this country, and that if you come into the country illegally, it's a crime. So I applaud him for this effort, and I think it's just one of several critical steps that has to be taken to stop illegal immigration or reduce it to the maximum extent possible.
The new rule comes after the Department of Homeland Security reported a 200% plus increase in illegal border crossings from March of 2017 to March of this year. Supporters of the new rule say even the threat of prosecuting first-time offenders should be a deterrent. But of course, this is more than just a threat. This is real. Julie?
Okay, so what else, Anita, is the Trump administration doing to change border security policy?
Well, there is another big change. The president announced yesterday he was doing away with something called catch and release. That's a long-standing policy that allowed illegal immigrants to be released from detention while they awaited a court hearing on their status, allowing them basically to disappear back into the U.S. Under the new policy, first-time offenders who are caught crossing into the U.S. illegally will likely face a minimum of 6 months in jail. Repeat offenders could be charged with a felony and longer prison sentences. And as we've been reporting throughout the day, we know the National Guard will be arriving soon on the border. They won't be able to assist in arresting people, but they can assist the Border Patrol in other ways, including merely acting as an additional deterrent just by being there. Julie?
Yeah, that's a good point, and a lot of the point behind sending these troops there. Anita Vogel, thank you. Well, the Surgeon General has a message for Americans when it comes to the opioid epidemic. It involves these kits. Dr. Mark Siegel will join me to show us at Explain next.
We're waking up America and we're telling them what's going on in the world. And that is such an awesome responsibility, but it's fun. What we're trying to do is not only tell you what's going on, but the backstory.
We're able to tell the folks at home, hey, this is important to you. This is why you need to listen. We have a great, honest conversation about what's happening in the news.
When people meet us, when they see us, they feel like they know us because guess what? They do. The only way to be successful on Fox is to be yourself.
And you know what? We do that every day.
This scourge of drug addiction in America will stop. 116 Americans die from an opioid-related overdose. Defeating this epidemic will require the commitment of every state, local, and federal agency. Failure is not an option.
President Trump very vocal about America's opioid problem. Now the Surgeon General adding to the fight, and this is rare, issuing a national advisory urging the public to carry a drug that stops overdoses. It's called naloxone. The medication can be used as an injection or nasal spray, and it kicks into gear immediately to reverse an overdose. Listen.
We have a person dying every 12.5 minutes from an opioid overdose. And what's shocking is that over half of these overdoses are occurring at home. That means we can't rely on 911. We can't rely on firefighters and policemen to save these lives. We need to arm Americans and folks who are around those individuals who are at risk.
Dr. Mark Siegel joins me now. He is a professor of medicine at New York University's Langone Medical Center and a Fox News contributor. Naloxone is the drug. And let's just remind our viewers how significant this is. For the Surgeon General to come out and issue an advisory, this hasn't happened in 30 years.
Absolutely, Julia. And he's doing it because we're seeing so many deaths from opioids. You know, he wants to target the 2 million people out there that are addicts and everyone around them, families, friends that know them, because we're seeing over 40,000 deaths per year from opioids. And you know why? Mostly because of a drug called fentanyl. Illicit fentanyl is so powerful that it stops breathing. Heroin is laced with it. Fentanyl itself was a prescription drug, but again, chemists are making it illegally. It kills people from stopping breathing. If you find somebody on the street and they're not breathing, and you see pinpoint pupils, and you see no signs of respiration whatsoever. You take a pulse. Now, I want people out there to not just know how to use this. This is what he's talking about, the Surgeon General. This is Narcan nasal spray, naloxone nasal spray. It's very simple to use.
Right.
You take your thumb like this, you literally squeeze it up into your nose, and if the person hasn't had opioids, it's not going to cause a problem. It doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt you. It has no side effects. But if they have taken opioids, and that's why they're laid out, they'll respond. You may have to give it again in 2 minutes because the opioid kicks back in. You may have to use the antidote more than once.
This is incredible because there were over 4,000 deaths that were related to opioid abuse last year. So something needs to be done, and we commend the president for doing that. The Surgeon General addressed, again, just how easy it is for the average person to get their hands on these lethal drugs. I want to play that for a moment, and then we talk about how serious this crisis really is.
In 49 out of 50 states, there's a standing order so bystanders can carry naloxone. I taught my niece Carly how to do it this morning. So anyone can save a life. Anyone can be a hero.
So now, more easy than it is to get your hands on opioids, it is to get a fix. Is this going to save lives?
It's called a hot shot, by the way, and it is so important. And with him coming out with an advisory, yes, he just said 49 states you can get it over the counter. Now, at NYU Langone, where I work, we give it out to every opioid addict who leaves the emergency room after an overdose for their family to use, for them to use. But now it's going to be more available in pharmacies. In pharmacies. After this, it's going to be readily available. I would encourage all pharmacy chains out there to carry it. And again, you can get it over the counter. Everyone who knows an opioid addict should absolutely have one of these kits. It's so easy to use. And everyone else out there, learn CPR, learn how to use those defibrillators on the wall, and learn how to use this. No downside.
Now, I just want to ask you regarding a possible downside, and this is just me sort of looking at both sides of this, because does this offer almost a safety net for those who abuse, are abusive of opioids, because they know that there's a fix?
I don't see it that way. That criticism has come out. I don't see it that way because there's a drug called Suboxone that's longer acting, that includes the naloxone in it, that literally is medically assisted therapy that decreases the addiction. All addicts should be on that. So I want them to have this life-saving option.
It's like an EpiPen.
It's like an EpiPen.
For opioid addicts.
And it's like a serpent. This disease gets a grip of your soul. It's so hard to get rid of it. We have to be sensitive and compassionate. We want victims of opioid abuse to have the ability to save their lives and everyone around them.
And
this
their
is a
loved ones,
lifesaver.
for sure. All right, Dr. Mark Siegel, always great to see you.
Great to see you, Julie.
This is a great idea. And I'm
Thank
glad
you.
to see that they're pushing it. Well, the relentless attacks from Syrian air raids devastating entire communities. How one town is coping as regime forces fight the rebels. Plus, do you ever just scribble a quick line on the screen when signing for a credit card purchase? Well, credit card companies are dropping the whole thing. We're going to explain why next.
Money talk. I say yeah.
I think that trust is becoming the most important factor in news.
Our responsibility is to ask the questions that are difficult and to demand answers of those people who are in power.
With the experience I've had in working at the White House, I think I'm better able to understand what's going on behind the scenes.
I'm part of that machinery at Fox News that works so hard to make sure that you not just know it first, but that you know it correctly.
The mainstream media's wild attacks on President Trump continued this week. And of course, our buddy Joe Scarborough was at it again.
Hey, Alex, instead of Trump makes bizarre false claims, can you say Trump lies and then just put in parentheses again, close parentheses, about illegal voting?
Perfect. Done. And do you believe that's just one of the most outrageous things that I heard this week? And here with a reaction to that and more, former Trump deputy campaign manager David Bossie. All right, David, what's your take on the two of them on air saying you got to put in the chyron, which is the little strip underneath, that the president's lying?
It just goes to show you how delusional MSNBC is. They have nothing else but their hate that they spew on their airwaves. Look, if they wanted to get better ratings, they'd run reruns of Gilligan's Island. They could outdo 50-year-old reruns would do better than Morning Joe. That's a fact. Right. So I'm just saying they have to do these things because it has become their shtick. And it's really damaging to democracy. It's damaging to our presidency, to the family of the first family. what they do every day in their hate-filled spiel is destroy what I believe is an important fabric, which is that we all want the president to succeed. This is really the first presidency that I've seen that, and I've watched him since Ronald Reagan, and we all disagree on policy. We disagreed with Barack Obama on policy, but we weren't.
But we respected him.
And the presidency and the first lady. Look, there were people out there, you could have the one-offs that do stupid things, but they are running. The left is running a program of hate across America, and it's despicable.
And I talked about it in my open tonight, but you know, Michelle Obama is part of that, where she says, my husband was a good parent, Trump is the fun parent, and this, she's talking about politics when she's at a women's leadership conference. So I think we got the sound here.
I always sort of felt like the 8 years that Barack was president, it was sort of like having the good parent at home, you know, the responsible parent, the one that told you to eat your carrots and go to bed on time. And now perhaps we have the other parent in the house. And we thought it'd feel fun. Maybe it feels fun to some for now because we can eat candy all day and, you know, stay up late and not follow the rules.
Did you see that woman across from her yesing her? I don't know what she was talking about.
No, it was gibberish. But look, Michelle Obama, again, it goes to my point. She is undermining it for the next first family. This is not helpful. She didn't appreciate, and she defended her daughters, and she should have, from those attacks, from irresponsible, mean-spirited people. She was offended, and she should have been during her time in the White House. It's unresponsible then. It's irresponsible now.
But you know what? Chelsea Clinton didn't get attacked. Their kids didn't get attacked.
The Bush daughters.
But attacking the Trump kids is a business.
And by the way, before the Trump presidency, the Trump children were revered, were thought of as unbelievably successful. Ivanka Trump, who is in her own right an incredibly successful young woman, mother, working mom, is somebody who young women have looked up to for years, and now she's in there and the left is attacking her. It's again, it's disgraceful.
And Ellen DeGeneres talking to Kamala Harris. I don't know if we have time for the sound, but Ellen says, do we have time? Let's hit it then, if we have time.
If you had to be stuck in an elevator with either President Trump, Mike Pence, or Jeff Sessions, who would it be?
Does one of us have to come out alive?
It's so funny. You know, these people make jokes that are not good for America. And I think that this is, look, Kamala Harris is part of the problem in California. She's been part of the problem. She is supporting, illegals. She supports sanctuary cities. She's not for law and order. She was the Attorney General of California. And now she's talking about wanting to see the Attorney General, the Vice President, the President not survive in an elevator as a joke. These are not funny things. And I'm sorry, it's not funny.
It's funny. I agree. David Bossie, good to see you here in Washington. And he was an advisor to Bill Clinton, and he has some advice for Donald Trump that may surprise you. Dick Morris is with me live next.